Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am a lawyer and the founder and CEO of Karam Law and Karam Kumai LLC. I turned to development and coding after I kind of got introduced or reintroduced to Documate after a couple of years. And I now am a professional no code, low code, hybrid, and intersectional developer, which I'll explain what all that means in a moment. And I've created lots of different workflows and builds and apps for lawyers and other people as well. I'm also the creator and host of Lightning Talks for Legal Innovators, which I do in partnership with Documate. And I'm the co-creator and senior instructor of a course on how to be certified in Documate. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile looks like this. I'm always happy to meet new people and connect. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go over how I was able to create this beautiful, lovely, free interactive digital magazine using Documate with only 2 variables. So I really love how this one turned out because basically the trick here is that I made it to where someone has to put in a code if they want to access the issues. So in our case, I've made it to where, let's say they want to try to put some word. They can't type more than 3 characters. So I give them a hint that it has to be 3 characters. And if they try to, do something that is not correct, like this one, for example, they think, oh, okay, it's code word hex, but actually it needs to be capitalized. Then when they say continue, they get this kickout page. Try again. Hint, what's in a name? That which we call a hex code by entering their name would turn font just as pink. Use your browser's back button to try again. And then there's a GIF here. So I'll show you how I made that as well. So let's go back and let's try to make it actually continue to the correct page. So here we have our different issues. Which issues would you like to view? So there's different issues of this magazine. This one's not out yet, so let's go to that one first. So I have a little GIF here that says title to be decided by me. Stay tuned. And then if they choose this other one, then they'll see this view. How I built this issue of my interactive digital magazine using no code, low code techniques and Documate with only 2 variables. So we're going to go over how I changed the color, how I added this divider line, how I made this look this way and added this emoji, how I added this link here, and how I got this video to embed, how I got this to be underlined, bolded, and italicized and changed the color, how I added these bullet points and links, how I made this font smaller, how I added images, how I was able to embed an image and linked it to make it to where people can also zoom in and zoom out or be directed to a different website if they click on this. Also, I'm going to show you how you can show code, add some help text as well, how I was able to also get this part to be a different color, and then how I was able to change the messages here. So we'll go over all of these things in turn, and it will be a little bit of a longer video just because there's a lot to cover. But I think the first thing where we'll start is to talk first about what tools I'm using. So let's talk about first Documate and why I like to use it. So Documate is a very powerful no-code tool. So the dashboard of a Documate builder account, so if you have a paid builder account, looks like this. So it makes it to where you can easily add new workflows or create new workflows, which when I say workflow, it means that it turns it into this app or web page or workflow or whatever you want to call it, because you can turn it into whatever you want. And that's why I say it's like really powerful, because you can not only create this so quickly, like within a second. So let's say just like create new workflow, demo workflow, and then we say create. And then after we create this, it's going to take us to this editor side. So this builder's editor side, we can literally just add a new page. So let's just keep new page, for example. And I just want to add a question. And when I say add a question, what I'm really referring to is adding a block type. So this is like, for example, this is an instruction block, whereas this is a text block. So this text block makes it to where the user, or the end user, I mean, can insert some data. So what we're going to do is just quickly, let's say we want to be able to create something really fast, to just say, oh, let's actually do an instruction block, and I can illustrate the difference here. So in this kind of no code space and tool, I'm going to say page 1, for example. I can say hello world like this. I can save it. I have a name for my workflow here, demo workflow. I have a page header name. I have a question title, which is just an instruction block, which means it's just going to come out like this text here. So I can just say hello world, and I can say run page 1, hello world. So I also can make it to where they can continue and they can get kicked out. If I wanted this to just be like the end of everything, then I could just make this a kick out page and say hello world, for example. Or even, yeah, let's just say hello world. So now it's just a page like this. And maybe let's see what we'd want to do here with this part. Now it just says hello world like this, and it's branded, and I have a link that I can then share with someone else, let's say a new incognito window. So when anyone goes to this link, they see hello world. So obviously you can clean this up and change the CSS and take off the header and all that stuff, but that's just to demonstrate how quickly you're able to have it to where you just create a workflow from your dashboard quickly. You just say the new workflow, it takes you to the editor. Let's go back to where we were here. And you're able to have a link to that workflow that you just built very quickly. Let's change over now to talk a little bit about traditional coding. And so I first got introduced to traditional coding through She Codes, which I highly recommend. I'm actually starting this on January 2nd, which is tomorrow for me. I'm filming this on the 1st. So I completed the She Codes Basics course after just kind of getting really interested in coding generally. And now I'm going to be doing all of them to be on the front end developer side of things. So I'm going to be incorporating talking about some of the things that I learned in She Codes Basics, including the VS Code editor. So basically, the She Codes Basic goes over things like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and how to use VS Code as an editor. So VS Code is a kind of like Document, you could say, but Document is a kind of different approach because it's formatted in a way like for you, so you can quickly launch things just in the 2 seconds that I was able to show you. VS Code is an editor that allows you to create it's a free tool that makes it to where you can create code quickly in several different programming languages without having to switch editors. So you can use it for Python, Java, C++, JavaScript, and more. And so what I'll show you here is the difference between what we just did with this Hello World no code editor here, which is a Document, for example, and you can change, like I said, all this, take off the header and change the formatting. It's just an example. And then also like what that would look like and what that process would be in VS Code. So if we go to VS Code, the way that you would create a new file or a new just project, you could say, is you say new file, and then you would give it a name. So usually let's say index.html, and then just enter. Then it's going to save to your computer. So I'm going to just put it on the desktop, create file. So now we have this file here, and you can see it here on my, sorry, let me just push this down for a second. You can see this here on the desktop. So when I double click on it, it's going to open a web page from my local source. So what that means is that when I type something on here in code, it's going to generate here to show me what it looks like on the output side. So one of the things I learned in She Codes is that there's a trick to having all of the kind of header stuff that you need in order to get started. So if you take Shift and, if you just insert an exclamation point and then press Enter, then it's going to give you all of this sort of stuff that you need in the beginning. This is a document title, so we can give it a title like we did in the other one. So let's say, like, I think we did demo workflow, for example. Um, and then it gives us like the code that we need to just kind of get started. And you can put other things in the head, but for now, let's just keep it here. And then I'm just going to save that. So this is, the colors might be different when you download it, because in She Codes Basics, he talks about how to change the colors and use things like prettier and different stuff like that. So let's just kind of focus here on this part of body. And what you can do in body, for example, if we wanted to say like hello world, for example, is we can put anything we want in here. So let's put like H1. If you just put H1 means header one, like you would see in any other type of thing, which would be, if you're doing, even in like a Google Doc, you can have an H1 or an H2 or an H3, and it just changes the size of the text. So you would have like normal body text, or you would have these different headers. So in our case, let's say hello world. And then we're just going to save that and refresh this. And now we see hello world here. So the difference between kind of no code and this kind of traditional coding is kind of how much from scratch and customized you would like your build to be. Some people want their web pages to be extremely customized. And so with that, you would want to go more towards this traditional coding type of form. If you're okay with having certain things already pre-set up for you, and you would prefer to do things in that way, or a little bit faster, or depends on what you're trying to do and how much you want to be pre-built out for you, you can do a hybrid of no code and traditional coding together, which is my preferred method, because you're able to code a lot faster and kind of launch your builds quicker. So I'll show you kind of how I'm doing that and how that works for me in my builds as a professional no code, low code hybrid developer. So as you can see here, I have in my build for Codeword Hex, which is this magazine that I created, I have used Document as my base editor rather than VS Code, because I can have the link, I can have the web page, I can have all the buttons, and I don't have to make all of that from scratch. And I can still customize it if I want to with custom CSS here. So if I could put a different color, I can put a different background, I can take off the header and all that stuff. So I don't have to manually code all of those different pieces if I don't want to. So with that being said, you'll still see code in here. You'll see this type of style. You'll see style, and you'll see HTML, and you'll see headers, and you'll see div styles. But I didn't manually code all of this, which I'll show you. I just knew where to find what I needed. And I'll show you what I mean by that as well. And there's a couple of things that you just kind of pick up along the way. So this looks quite complicated, but you'll see it's actually quite simple. So let's start at the beginning by reverse engineering what I created here. So with Codeword Hex, just starting from the top, how I made these sidebars, how I made this front page, let's start from top to bottom. So for Codeword Hex, you'll notice that this part hex is actually in a different color and in a slightly different font as well. So how I was able to do this was actually able, and actually one thing I'll point out really quickly, even from the top, is 2 points here. First is, let's say 3 points here. First is the favicon. So if you have a document account, then and a builder account, such as an admin paid account, then you can go to settings, system settings, and you can change your favicon and your logo here. So the favicon is the thing that's going to show up here next to the title, and the logo is going to show up here. Just be mindful of the sizing, because I think mine is like 150 by 60 or something like that. And then the other thing to note is the title of your page here is what you've put here. So in my case here, demo workflow, when we run it, you'll see demo workflow here. Whereas in code word hex, you have code word hex here, because that's what I've titled my, my build. So the next thing we're going to do is go back to talking about this part here, which is how I got this to change color. So the first thing that I did was I changed the color of this and made it into a code. So I'm indicating to the computer. So basically all of coding and no code development and regular traditional code development and all of the above is you having a conversation with the computer. So you're talking to the computer and telling it what you want it to do. So you're saying, or like what this, you're telling the computer what this is. So you're saying, hey, I want you to treat this piece of information in the middle as code. And you do that by adding a backtick. So a backtick on your computer keyboard. Let's say if you're on a Mac, for example. So it's this kind of, let's see, it's usually like on my keyboard, for example, it's actually like here. So it looks like this small little guy here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So now that's starting the way, but you can see here that it's this little tick here. So if you use the back tick, then you're indicating to the computer that this is, I want you to treat this as code and display as such. And that's really powerful when you're doing a lot of, let's say from, in my case, instruction, because I want to show you what my code is. So in this case, it's just a word, but as like just a fun thing, I wanted to turn it pink and have a coding look. So let's move on to this block here. So now we're going to talk about the power of an instruction block and how I used it actually throughout most of this build. So in my case, I have simply added a question type. As you can see here, you have lots of different types of blocks that you can use, and it just changes like how it renders on the other side. So for example, if I add here, let's say an email block, and I say, what is your email address? And then I make a variable email address, and a variable just makes it to where you can refer to this particular question in many different places through documents and through different parts of your build and so on. So it's really, really important. And it's also really important to think about making this very clear and also to track them in a variable map, which I'll explain more later. So in our case here, we've added this question block of, so by going here and then saying email, we've added this question block, and you can make it required or not. And I've saved it. And when I refresh over here, now we're going to see what is your email address. So that's how quickly you can add or delete or change what you have on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one and save it. And then let's go on to this next part here. So in my case, I just created an instruction block because that's just, I just wanted text here. But later what we'll talk about is not being too precognitively committed to what this is called. This is just something that, this is just a label that has been given to this information or instruction block for a way of communicating what it could be, but it doesn't mean that that's the only thing that this can be, instructions. So in our case, I've put text and I've put welcome, and I've used this backtick again to render this pink and in a kind of a code format. And then I just have some text. And then what I've done here is used a convention or syntax that of a straight bracket on either side of the text that I want to show, and just parentheses around either side of a hyperlink to hyperlink that text here so that when someone clicks on it, it takes them to this other place that I want them to go. So that's super easy to do. You just literally do straight bracket, and then like, let's say hello world. And then you put parentheses and then whatever link. So let's put LinkedIn, for example. So you just grab that link and then put it in the middle here. So when I save and refresh here, now I can see hello world and it will take me to LinkedIn. Great. Let's move on to the next part of this. So one of the other things I'll point out here is that you can have settings in the back, which is some help text, and you can actually put code and markdown. So this part here, this little asterisk here, is something called markdown. So what's cool about actually Document specifically and the no code, sort of low code hybrid approach to development is that you can mix like Markdown, HTML, CSS, and all of these different pieces together into the document editor. So Markdown is a way that you can change how text is formatted in an editor and in your workflow builds. So for example, in this help, I was able to change how this is formatted by using that mix of Markdown and HTML. So for example, here, if I pull this out into, let's say, a new note, just to show you. So it looks like this, but let's break down what's happening in each section. So in this part, I've used Markdown, an asterisk on either side of this section here to say, make it italic. So italicized. So I've italicized this. But in this help text one, part of the reason why I've pulled this out as well is because I'm gonna delete it to show you what it also would look like if I didn't have that. So let's just say if I was just gonna try to do it like this, where I say, what is a hex code? Hex code is blah, 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 blah. Then what's actually gonna happen is it was going to scrunch up together and not look very good. So if you want for it to be, and you can also use, by the way, shortcuts on your keyboard, such as Command Z to go like undo and redo. So you can get back to where we were before here. And you can see that I've added so many different things. So let's go back to refreshing it to where I had it before, where it's kind of well formatted. So this is help text you can add. So I have it italicized here using Markdown. And then I've used actually HTML to format the rest of this here because that's the way that I'm communicating with the computer in this block and section. So let's break each part down specifically. So here we've used Markdown to tell the computer that I want this to be italicized by adding an asterisk on either side. A BR means break. So if you just do these two alligator things and you say BR in the middle, then that just means put this text underneath the whatever came before it. I've added 2 here to have a little bit more of that space. So if it was just one BR, then it would actually appear here right under it. But I want there to be a space, so I've added 2. So let's go back to where we were here. So BR for anything is a great one to remember because it just means add one, push this below. Next, let's talk about this P symbol. So P means paragraph. And if you notice in this case, you always want to wrap, there's 2 different kinds of elements, or like you could say syntax or whatever, that Matt Delax explains really well in She Codes Basics, or just the She Codes workshops. So this is kind of like a self-closing instruction to the computer. It's just saying, put this under here. And it's not like, it doesn't really have anything within it. But this P paragraph has a lot of different things inside of it. And we will need to close it out at the end. And you close something out in code by putting this kind of like slash. So this is how the convention would be for a paragraph. You want to have it open. You're saying like, hey, I'm going to start a paragraph now. And then you want to close it saying, hey, I'm done now with that paragraph. So if we look at this, it looks quite complicated, but that's really just what I'm saying here is I'm just telling the computer, this is start of the paragraph and this is the end, and I'm going to do some stuff inside of it. So let's go on next to how I was able to, so I just have text, text, text here, text, text, text. Let's go on to the next one I have here, which is an unordered list. So an unordered list is a bullet point because an ordered list was actually going to be like 1, 2, 3. So an unordered list just says, I want you to do bullet points here. So now that, just to point out why I haven't used Markdown here, because in other parts of our build, we do use Markdown to make bullet points, which is really simple. You just use an asterisk and then a space and then your text, as you've even seen like here. But in our case, we've actually wrapped this in a P. So the computer is expecting us to communicate with it in HTML right now and not in Markdown. So it wants us to talk to it in the language it will understand right now in this context. So how you can do that is actually by using this unordered list. So if we break this down, we have, this is the text wrapping of what we're doing. And then we're going to talk about this like this unordered list. So we're saying unordered list has list items within it, and we have that ending as well at some point on both sides. So in our case, if we kind of break this out a little bit, what we're actually seeing here is that we have a paragraph that has within it an unordered list with list items. So like the same concept here, we need to tell the computer when the unordered list starts and when the unordered list ends. In our case, we have a list item that also needs to be told when it ends, the first one, and it will be in order. So in our case, we have 3 list items, element 1, element 2, and element 3. So when we go to our note here, we see element 1, red, value, blah, blah, blah. We can put that within our list item and the closing list item. If we want to do the next one, we can do the same convention and change the inside text, which is now element 2, and that is green value, and so on. So when this outputs on the other side, we're going to have it look like this. Element 1, red value, all with bullet points at the end. So that's actually what is being said here, is that we want this paragraph to contain an unordered list with a list item called element 1, red value, and then I want another one that says this, and how it renders on the other side is in bullet points. So even though this looks weird and complicated, it's actually just understanding what you're saying to the computer. So you're just saying to the computer all of those things that we said. So let's go on. So we've covered actually all the way up to here where we use the BR again. Same thing here. I'm just saying that I want spaces. So all of this is actually just saying this. So next we'll talk about an anchor element and a excuse me, and an href, which is just saying that I want a hyperlink. So let's go to that point. So what we're saying here is that we have a paragraph, we have an unordered list, we have text if we want, and what's next is this part here. So if I want to say explanations from the Ultimate Guide to Hex Colors by iStock, and I want, when they click on it, to have them go to this page here, then what we're going to have here in our help text here is this last part right here. So by iStock, you could even say. So let's go take away our unordered list for now and just focus on the href. So an A tag, you see it opens here and actually doesn't have that ending thing until here. But if we look at this, we're just saying, I'm sorry, it doesn't end until here. Is that we want to anchor this href or this hyperlink. And so the convention actually, when you take away everything that looks complicated, is just a href equals, and then this quote, and then it will be link, or like we should say URL. So that this looks complicated because this one's very long, and then an end quote here, and then you can close it. And then, so that is like this P, this is this A, but it just has the href and the URL. And then we have the text of what you want to appear here. And then you close out the anchor here like this. So this is actually what this is saying rather than it looking complicated here. And you could even just take off this point if we just want to focus here. So in your case, let's say you want this link to go to LinkedIn, and you would take that link and just insert that here. And then let's say you want this to say LinkedIn. Then when it renders, then on the other side, what that's going to say is LinkedIn, and people can click on it and go to LinkedIn. So that is how I was able to have italicized this italicized sort of header here using Markdown, and then going into a little bit of coding here in HTML to have an unordered list, some breaks, and also a hyperlink within the help text. So I actually, what I did in this case was I wrote it, since this help text box isn't very easy to code within, I just used a note just like this and sort of wrote it out the way that I wanted it. And then just copied and pasted it into it just so I could see it better. But that's the breakdown of how what I used in each of these pieces. Okay, so now that we've covered that section, let's see if there's anything else in here we want to talk about. So we've talked about how I was able to get this to be thought about as code. We've talked about how I was able to make this a hyperlink using just that sort of straight bracket, and parentheses convention. And then how I was able to get this help text little button to show in the first place, which was just by going to settings and adding text in the help text area. And then also how I was able to use Markdown and code within that in order to have this be the way that I wanted it to be. Next, I'll show you how I was able to add this text input box in question here. So for that one, we just say, go back to add question, and you just choose text, because what you're saying is to document is you're saying that I want there to be a block where a person or end user can enter text and I can see it in my data manager, or they can, and I can also do other things with it as well, such as have it show up in a Word document or whatever else. So, or I want it to just have it be a code that opens or unlocks the next page, as it is in this case. So the way that we do that is just by adding question and then saying text, and then by putting our question title, and the question title is going to show up here. So in my case, I said, please enter the code word below to access the issues. So you can say like, what is your name, for example, and then you can have your variable be something like first name. Let's say first, what is your first name? And you can make it required or not. And then when we refresh here, then we'll see what is your first name, and we'll see that it's required. Now, if you wanted to quickly duplicate this, you could just say duplicate, and you can make a second question, like what is your last name? And then you can take off the 2 and you can put last name, for example. And when you render it over here, then you'll see what is your first name and what is your last name. And so that's how quickly you'll be able to do that. So let's delete this one. Or actually what we can do now is what is your, well, I don't use that in this particular build, so I won't explain it, but you can also make things conditional, like show if. So if I say show if code word is Brittany, then this question will only show if that code word is, if the person enters Brittany. In our case, they won't be able to because I have a minimum and a maximum value that must be entered. So if I try to put in Brittany, then it's not going to let me because you cannot type more than 3 characters. So in that case, this question will never show because this is never possible based on what I've created. So that's actually relevant to this hidden page, for example, because I am working on something, but I don't want you to see it yet. So what I've done is I've made this hidden page by saying, show this page if code word, which is referring to the variable that I have with associated with this question. I'm saying show this page if that code word entered, that the input, the data input by the end user is this value, which, like I said, is never possible because I've made a minimum and a maximum character value for this question. So how I was able to do that in order to make it to where I can play with that a little bit is I gave this a code word. This a variable called code word. And a quick note here to pause to say I always have a master variable list, just a plain Google document where I keep all of my variables like this, very simply. And it's saved me so much in the future because variables can be a whole other section all on their own, and about the importance of them, and like because using them consistently and in a consistent manner across all of your builds is really important when you want to move data from one place to, from, let's say, from one workflow to another. But in this case, what I usually do is I just highlight across and I just have the name of the workflow, and then I just put my variables in as I create them. So I just copy and paste it. So I like anytime I make a new variable, I come over here and I just copy and paste it where it needs to go. And I just check to see if I already have a variable created for what I'm trying to do and talk about. So variable mapping and saving is really, really important. So in our case, I've said code word. It's a text box and I've made it required. And then what I want them to do is I want them to, the end user, when I say them, is I want the end user to be forced to only have a minimum of 3 characters and a maximum of 3 characters to force them into knowing that the code word has 3 letters or 3 characters. You can also add help text here if you want to. So let's say help text. If I put that there, and if I want a default value, I can add that here if I want to. Let's say if I want the default value to be like, to be hex, for example, if I want people to be able to see that, then when it renders, it's going to automatically have the answer populated here. And there's a whole other section on default values that we can go into, but we're not going to do that right now because you can actually like add code in here as well, like this, and refer to a variable such as code word, but not in this particular example because it's the first question. So it doesn't know, there's no variables that come before it. So we won't do that now, but you'll notice that I also have a help text here that says help text. So you can do a lot of different things with just a text question block. So in our case, I just said enter the code word below to access the issues. if we go to settings, you'll see a minimum and a maximum value of 3 for each, and I've made it required. So that's how you have it from the first page. But also, if you notice one other thing, I have 2 points here I can point out, which is save link to continue later, as well as this sidebar. So the way that you have that little sidebar label, which is kind of a progress bar, which shows the person or indicates to the end user where they are within the workflow, is you just go up here to add whatever you want. So here I just say welcome. And then on this one, I say welcome. I'm sorry. If you want other pages, subsequent pages, to be under the same label here, then you just put the same exact thing as the one that came before. So welcome, this is part of this one, or not came before, but the section that you want it to be a part of. So in this case, the next one is issue 1.1, January 3rd, 2023. So that one goes here, and so on. So in our case, the next part I was going to show you is save link to continue later. So save link to continue later is in your settings. So default is that these are unchecked, I believe. So you can make it to where the final review page is skipped. If you want this to just be something where they don't have to review, like the end user doesn't have to review any of the input that they put in at the end, where they can go back and edit. And that's how it is in my case in this build. And then if you want to include a link for the user to continue later, which I do because let's say like somebody is on issue like 1.12, then they can pick up right from there if they wanted to continue reading from there. But you don't have to have that if that's not what you want your build to have. So that is how I was able to kind of get to this point where I want the code word to be hex. And so one more actual piece to the point of hex here is that it makes it to where there's the split off between the try again page, kick out page, where they get kicked out sort of the workflow and have to try again, and the welcome to the issues page. So as you remember, when I did it like this, when I input the text in lowercase, I went to this page that says try again, which is a kickout page, which you notice is different because it doesn't have a continue on the bottom. But when I insert the word correctly as a capitalized hex, then I say continue, then I can see this issues page and I can review and read or listen to the different pages. The different instruction. So the way that I have done that and set that up is I've created a kickout page. And as I said, a kickout page, I created that first. So a kickout page just makes it to where the end user just sees a page that doesn't allow them to continue anymore or at all. So in our case of the demo workflow, we used a kickout page because we didn't want there to be any like thing else. We just wanted it to be kind of a static page. We didn't want anyone to interact with it in any way. So that's just to say that in order to get to that point, all you have to do, and you can see I can't add anything else because it needs its own page. But if you were going to do that, you could say add a page here, and then you can say kick out page here, like this, and then you just add instruction, whatever you want. So I'm going to delete that one for now. And what I've done with that kickout page, which we'll go on to now for just this logic part, is I've said edit page logic. So you can add logic to pages to make them conditional, shown or not shown, conditioned based on input that comes before or whatever else. So in our case, I want this page to show if someone has not entered the code correctly. But if they have inserted the code correctly, then I want that to be hidden. So if I say edit page logic, then I can say hide if, I can say show if or hide if, but in our case, I want this to be hidden if the code word is correct. And so with that, now I have this one showing up because I didn't insert it correctly, and the end user got kicked out. Now I want them to see the issues page if they insert it correctly. So now I say show if code word is hex. So that's how I was able to make it to where we have the split off of the incorrect answer and the correct answer. So the next part of this is going to be, let's go to the kickout page. So as I pointed out here, I want this to still be part of the welcome tab. I didn't want there to be a next tab that says like, sorry, try again or anything like that, because I'm just considering visually what this looks like. But let's go to that kickout page and I'll show you how I was able to do each part of that. So this is just an instruction block here, or sorry, that kickout sort of instruction, you could say. I've changed that header. So header is try again. And then I've just had some text here. So this is just regular text except for this backtick to make that pink and like a code. And then the next part is this part here, which looks like a bunch of code that I'm going to have to explain, but like I did with the with the help text. But actually, I just knew where to find this. So I knew I wanted a GIF. I like Giphy because it's got a ton of really great ones. So I say Giphy. And I can just search for something that I want. I kind of knew that I wanted this, you didn't say the magic word. So I just said, like, you didn't say the magic word. And then I just found one that I liked. And then also I just had to say embed. And then I just said if I wanted it to be responsive or not. And that changes the code a little bit. I wanted it to be responsive. So I just said copy code. And then I just literally copied and pasted it in here. So you don't and then actually what you'll see here is that the difference between the two that you'll see, because this one looks longer than that one, is that I just know. So when you render this on the other side, for example, and you look at the difference between the two, this one has this via Giphy at the bottom, and I don't want it to have that. So when you look at this code and you're not, just don't be intimidated by it, because now you know like kind of what it's saying or what it's trying to say, is that you know that this is an anchor link that just has a link and some text. So you just look for it. So it's saying here that this is the actual part that's important for the GIF itself. And then this is just a part that's telling the computer, now I want you to do something else, like outside of that. Have a paragraph that has a link with some text. So we just talked about the anchor link, anchor element, and href. So this is just sending us to Giphy, the Giphy's like page. It's not important for like what our purposes are. So I can take that off because you can actually get there by just clicking on it anyway, like all these different things anyway. So they still get attribution. So you can take that off right there. And then now they're the same. So let's take off the second one here. And so even though it looks complicated, a lot of coding is knowing where to find code that someone has already done for you. So in our case, someone's already done that for us. So we're going to just go ahead and refresh. And now we're back to where we were before. So let's go next to the page where it's correct. So if we go to the page where we have it correct, like they've put in the correct, and by the way, this is the toolbar, which is super handy. You can open it or close it. And you can also search and do filters. So you can filter by question type. You can, and within that, you can say like, oh, combo box or Clio contract. You can also search questions and variables for something. So if I am looking for let's say, like I have here, like table, for example, then it's going to highlight and show me where that is and take me there. Okay. So that's pretty powerful, actually. And you can expand or close or collapse just to make it easier. And you can actually also drag the order of questions and go straight to them. So it's really good as a navigation. So you can like move this up, for example, without having to drag this entirely huge box or like block up and down. So the toolbar is super, super handy, and I'm always using it and have it open. So let's go to, so we've talked about this sort of initial page. We've talked about the kickout page, and we're going to talk about now if somebody has inserted the correct code. So one of the things too is just to add a page, because I've already built these pages out, so I'm kind of skipping this part, but you can just say add page here, and that's how you create a new page. But I don't want that one, so I'm going to delete it. So now we're going to go on to, like I said, this issues page. So this issues page is just showing the end user the issues page here like this. So this is a multi-select. So one of the question block types, or the block types you can use, is a question one called multi-select. So if you say multi-select, then you're giving the person an opportunity to select multiple different options. But if you only want them to be able to choose a single option, let's say single test, then you would use this one and then say like option one, option two, and so on. You can make it required or not, add logic, add help text, have a default value, whatever else you'd like. So show if this variable is something, and so on. So in this case, if I want to render this, then I'd say be able to see it like this, and they can only choose one option. But I want somebody to be able to read multiple issues if they want to, so I've chosen to use multi-select. Another one that you can use is a yes, no. So if you already know that you want it to be like kind of true, false, or yes, no. So if you want them to just say like yes, like for example, like are you married? And I'd say like married, yes or no as, let's say, the variable. Then over here, I'm going to see, are you married? Yes or no. And that's really good if you are doing things like conditional logic, like you want to show or hide a paragraph or a page or anything like that. Yes, no is really good. In our case, I wanted to use a multi-select so people can have multiple, they can select multiple things. So a couple things I wanted to point out with what I did here is you'll notice that I have markdown used and even emojis within this as well. So you can be creative and playful with how you create your builds. You don't have to have it just be like very straightforward. You can make it to where, and also to experiment with using things like markdown in your builds. So in this case, 2 asterisks means that I want you to bold it. 1 means that I want you to italicize it, and 3 means I want you to bold and italicize it. And Documate actually has a great learning center on this, like article on this. So let's see if I can find formatting questions. And so they give you a ton of different ways that you can use this. And actually, like the markdown, that one that we used before to hyperlink something is this kind of what I said about like straight in parentheses on either side. So as I was just saying like earlier, you can do italic, bold and italic. Emphasize text is like that backtick code that you'll see as well. And then that link text here, bullet points, if you want to use markdown instead of coding, BR as a break, headers and different things. So heading, subheading, an email link. This is that anchor link href that we talked about already as well. And then actually something that's really cool that I haven't used a ton, but I like a lot is having a collapsible section of text, which is really cool. So I'll use that in a future one, for example, and it's just a tiny bit of code that you can use, which is really fun. So let's go back to what I actually did. So as I said, I just used a multi-select question type. I didn't have any logic attached to this or have any help text or default values for this one, just because of the way that like I just want the user to choose what they want. But I did have fun adding some markdown into like around text and then adding an emoji. So I have a Mac, and the way that I kind of do a quick add of an emoji is Control Command spacebar. So that's Control Command spacebar, and that brings up this emoji sort of picker. So I just chose one I liked, double clicked on it, and then that was it. You can also use like your kind of keyboard here or here, show emoji or show keyboard viewer. So if you want to do it that way, you can. So it's always fun to add an emoji or two here and there. One thing I'll note is when you change something in here, be really, really careful, because in my case, I have this logic. It says the question you've edited is dependent, like this something is dependent on this for their logic. So in my case, I've just removed the logic for this page, which is not great. So now I have to try it again, which mag issue is the second one. Oh, sorry. So coming soon, because just but what's good about this is that if something that is dependent, or like you've changed something that something else is dependent on, Document will tell you, and will tell you like where to look. But you should just know that that's going to happen if you change anything, and be really mindful about that when you're building something, because it could be like you've just changed something that's dependent like way far down in your build that now you have to go find it. So just be really aware. It's not that you can't change anything, it's just to say, like, be aware of what happens when you change something so that you don't mess up your builds. And you can keep that in mind in your design strategy thinking, because that will change like how you write something in the future. So I think we've kind of gone over kind of that kind of stuff, but just to note that we haven't done any repeating items in this particular build, but if you had something that you wanted to reference, then you could here. So in our case, I wanted to show you one cool thing that I didn't know before, but you can have the default value of this question, like a multi-select, be all, like where all of them are selected, which is pretty cool. Or you can have it to where it's just like one or the other is the default value. So like I said, I don't have a sort of any other of these, but if you wanted to reference a different repeating item, you can do that there. So let's move on to the next part. I think we've kind of gone over everything here. And let's go on to what happens when someone chooses one or the other or both of these. So in our case, I'm going to choose both so I can show you kind of each one and continue. So now if you notice, since we've gone now on to the next progress bar, it's highlighted now this one in blue. And so I've chosen issue 1.1, January 3rd, 2023. And there's a lot of different parts to this build, which we'll go over. So starting with this part at the top. So issue 1.1, January 3rd, is in green, or Viridian, which is the one I looked up. So let's go to this here on my toolbar. So let's open this section and see what I've done on this page. So if you notice and remember, I talked about like page logic. So what I'm saying in this particular page logic is I want you to show the page if they've chosen issue 1 in the previous page. So to do that, I've said edit page logic, show if the variable which mag issue is a value of issue 1.1. And there's ways to have like multiple logic attached to different things by using invisible logic, but I haven't done that here, so I'll explain that in a future issue. But I wanted to kind of point out a few things about this from the get-go, which is that you see a lot of code on here and it's going to look like there's a lot of complicated stuff, but when we break it down together, it will be very straightforward. And just to point out that I only had to use two variables to create this code word and which mag issue to make this, because of the power of each of these sections and instruction blocks to read code and to read text and to render that the way that you want it to, and to read markdown. So it operates as an easier to use VS Code in a way. So we actually can close this out because I'm done with this part, because I know I'm already done with this build, but you would keep this open if you're making one and you would add your variables along the way. But in my case, it just needed these two. So let's close these out. Now, the first thing I wanted to just kind of point out is the different things we'll go over and what I've done here. So here I have a header that is centered and has a different color. It has an underline sort of divider inserted here. It has a different type of header here, an emoji like we talked about. It has a link in it as well. So let's just talk about this section first. And then this divider is a default divider that's added after this kind of header section. So the first thing I will say is that I like things to be centered. So you'll see me use center quite a lot. And center, to just center what you want. In this case, I wanted all of this to be centered from here to here. You just wrap that in this center configuration. So you just do this center, and then you have text that you want, and then you close it out with that kind of backslash and then center again. And just to quickly note, something that Matt Delac points out in cheat codes as well is that computer code, at least like the ones that we're talking about, are in English, like American English spelling. So it's CENTER rather than center as in like a British spelling or other kind of people who spell it that way. So anyway, what we're just saying here is that we are wrapping the text that we want centered into a center code like this. So even though this looks kind of weird and all together, what we're actually saying here is center the text, these things. So let's break each part of this down, each section of this. So that's the first part, which is the center tag here. So we can kind of just break this out more visually, like easier to see. So we have everything wrapped in the center so that it centers in the middle. Next, we have the P, like that paragraph that we said. And within this one, we're actually doing some styling. So some styling is can be done separately in CSS, which has something like you would say, let's say like an H1, and then you'd use like curly brackets to create some styling, whatever you want, like padding or colors or like color, blah, blah, blah. And then you would like close it in a bracket, but a curly bracket. But in our case, you can actually also style within HTML as well. So let's say you do this kind of paragraph configuration. So this actually looks more like it's just being able to like know how things start and end, and then what is the actual text that's in the middle or whatever the case is. So in our case, I'm just saying I have a paragraph that I want you to style in the color, and then this is a hex code, which I'll point out in a second. So then this is the text that I want you to have styled in that color, and then stop is what it's saying. So basically, in this case, I just Googled hex code for Viridian. So I just think I said like hex code for Viridian, which is a color here. So then I just copied and pasted that. So it's not like a hard thing to do. I just said literally hex code for Viridian and then just copied and pasted that here. So that's the coding convention. And actually I think I just looked up like HTML for colors text or something. And then I just found one that says, style, and just showed me like what I needed to do. So uh, that's just kind of how like I just Google stuff all the time. I'm always Googling things to see like how do I do such and such a thing. And I've put some references to some of these different things here. So like Document and She Codes and VS Code and different things that I've referenced as well. Um, like HTML color is the one that I think I found here, which is just like, oh, okay, this is how I did this one. So that's how I was able to find that code, for example, um, where I got this. So I didn't have to memorize it. I just had to know like, oh, what do I need to Google, which is HTML, color, text, and then see what comes up. So that's how I was able to do that. The next part of this is the sort of like the underline here. So actually, that's just using, in my case, an underscore. So like you just find that on your keyboard, um, and sorry, and just use like an underscore. So if you want that to, you just have to do like think three. Let's just double check. 1, 2, 3, and then that will show you this kind of divider bar here. And so that's pretty like straightforward as well. I think in the Learning Center for Documate, they say like using like a tick, like I'm trying to see what like divider formatting. Yeah, so I think it says use like 3 or 4. Okay, it says add dividers between phrases using 4 or more dashed lines. So you can try this. I've seen this other places as well where it's the dashed lines. So instead of the underscore, it's dashed like just a regular kind of dashed line. However, like whenever I try to do that, for some reason, it doesn't like it. So in either case, just see which one works for you. For me, I just have to use 3 underscore lines, and maybe in your case, you use 4 dash lines. That gives me that nice bar here. And then how I was able to make this look like this text looks like this is using an H5. You could also use the markdowns hashtags to do this. So, for example, if I wanted something here to say like hello world, you could do it that way. And it would change how this looks. And in that help guide family question article, you can see that here. Hashtag heading, hashtag subheading 2, 3, blah, blah, blah will lead to these different ones. Personally, I just kind of like prefer this. And sometimes you have to, if you've already started to do like some code for, depending on like where within your build you're doing it. But if you notice, like we talked about, this is actually not as confusing as you think if you just break it out like this. So what we're really saying is we're wrapping this text in an H5. So I'm just saying H5 and then closing it off with that backslash. And then you put your text in the middle. So a lot of this comes down to like, how does it look? And it looks hard because it looks messy and like mixed together. And so it's hard to pull apart what you're looking at. But what you're actually really looking at is just any text that you want inside of an H5 or a header 5. Um, the next piece is how I got this part. So in that case, we have the same thing that we just talked about with H6 instead of H5. And then an anchor link like we talked about already, where I just said bye, and then I have an anchor link that says the href goes to this URL, and I want it to display this text. And that's it. So that's how I was able to have issue 1 be a different color and centered, how we got this divider line, how I was able to get this to be a certain type of header, how this was able to be a certain type of header, and how I was able to hyperlink this. The next thing we'll go on to is how I was able to have a video embedded at the top. So the way that you'll do that is I just use an instruction block. And for all of the rest of this, I used an instruction block because, like I said, an instruction block is way more powerful than just to have text instruction. It's actually a code editor and a code reader, you could say. So in our case, for this particular circumstance, I use Vimeo Record as my sort of screen recorder and audio recorder to do all of my tutorials and courses and videos and everything. So what I actually have done is I have just copied. It's like I said, it really goes down to being able to know where to go to find what you're looking for. So let's say I want to, let's say go to this one and I want to add this one into like this video into my build. Then in Vimeo Record, all you have to do is say embed and then choose if you want it to be responsive or fixed. And you say copy embed code. And then you just copy and paste that here. So that's what I've done in this case. So let's go to the bottom of this and add another one. So you can see like it get added here. So now we have 2. 1, 2. And that's it. So like I said, you don't have to know how or memorize how to do like divs and styles and iframes and all this kind of crazy title and blah, 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 and how to actually like make this JavaScript. You don't have to do that. You just have to know where to find this information. Same thing if you want to embed like a YouTube video, for example. So let's say we want to embed literally like any of these. Let's say we like this deep focus music one. And we want to embed this one into our workflow. Then you just go to share, embed, copy, and then we're going to put that here, paste that here. And now we have this beautiful concentration. And the person can even go to full screen. They can share it. They can do interact with this as much as they want to. So in our case, I'm going to take that off. And I'll later replace this placeholder, with the video that I'm recording right now. So now we have a header with a divider and an H5 and an H6 and a link and all the different things here. And we also have an emoji, which is I already showed you before how to add that. We have an interactive within your app video, playable video that people can share and like and all sorts of stuff. They can view in full screen and everything. So the next thing we're going to focus on is how I created this part here, which is also going to look complicated, but it's actually quite simple. So it looks like this. So this is what it looks like on the front side to an end user. And this is what it looks like on the builder backside. But I'll show you why it's not complicated as well, just by taking this first part. And then we'll go into the partner link one in a second. So all of the rest of these are going to be a repeat of just this one line. So if we just look at this one line by itself, what we're doing is we're making this part. Let's make this part first. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make something text underlined, bold, italicized, and a different color. That's the goal. So the way that we can do that is by using Markdown and HTML, stuff that we've already learned, and some just one new thing or two as well. So as I mentioned before, 3 asterisks in Markdown means I want it to be italicized, bolded, italicized and bolded. So basically, like as we said, bold is 2 and italicized is 1. So you're just saying I want it to be bolded and italicized. And then to make it underlined, you just use this convention which I'll pull out here in a sec. So it's just a U. So actually what's happening is this. I just say, I want this text to be underlined. And I've seen in different forums and posts and stuff that say that you're really not supposed to use this one or whatever because it can be confusing for people because normally links are underlined, which is fine. Like you see how this gets underlined. But for our purposes, like I want this to be underlined and there's not really another way for me to do that. So I just want it to, like the user, the end user will know that this is not a link because it's just a section header. So that's kind of just to say, and they'll know that they'll be able to see that they can't click on it. So that's fine. And if I wanted to, I could even make this like a bigger header using things that we've already learned as well, like H1s or Markdown. But really what's happening here is this part here is telling the computer, I want you to bold and italicize this. And then this part here is saying, I want you to underline this text as well. This part here is saying to the computer, this is a paragraph, right? This is a paragraph, but I want you to style this paragraph in this color. In my case, I wanted it to be violet. So I said hex code for violet. And then I just copied and pasted the hex code for violet in the appropriate section. So it makes me look so brilliant. But actually, all we're doing is just copying and pasting and knowing what to like search for and knowing where to look. So that's basically all we had to do is we just had to also remember to close it out and to have this. Now the next part we are going to look at is this part here, which is how I got it to have a bullet point. So in Markdown, and then also the hyperlink, which we've already learned. In Markdown, all you have to do is do an asterisk and a space, like we've learned before. And then as you can see here, I have text and a hyperlink together in straight brackets and parentheses to make it be a hyperlink. So that's all we had to do, actually. And then I just repeated that over and over again for each of these other things. And that's it. Because I wanted you to be able to click on these. And it just looks like a big block of stuff only because I copied and pasted some links that are kind of long. And that's it. That's how you get bullet points and links and everything to look like this. And all of these like references for places that I searched to find some of this, like HTML U tag and how to insert an HTML web page and text color and all that stuff. Color codes for Viridian and everything are here. What is Markdown? What's HTML? Vimeo and Vimeo Record, how I use that, and so on. I had read before, so that's why I referenced this article. And also, one thing I'll point out about hex codes and colors is something called Colorzilla. So I love Colorzilla because it lets you pick a color from a page. So it's a Chrome extension where you click on it and you say pick color from page. And then you can just pick a color from the page. If you see when I put my cursor over this greenish color, it gives me all this information about that here, the top bar. And you can click on it. When you click on it, it copies it to your clipboard. So then you can easily paste it wherever you want. So that's a really good one to get as well as an extension. And then so we've talked about how we can do this part. We've talked about how I got the bullet points and how I got the links and things like that. Let's talk about how I made this text really small. And obviously you could do that, let's say if you wanted it to be, you can do that in many different ways. But one way that you can do that is an article I found on how can I change the size of text on my web page. And so this one explains that the content has been archived. It's no longer maintained. The information may not be accurate. In most recent, they preferred the method for taking the size, changing the size as CSS instead of this method. But this is how you can do that in HTML using this font tag, which is less flexible but compatible. And so in this case, it's just explaining that the default size is 3 and the largest that can be displayed is 7. So if you're going to want to increase or decrease the relative size of font, then you can say plus 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, to make this font plus or minus to make it bigger or smaller. So in our case, I wanted to have, or you can just say like what font size you want it to be. So like, for example, to specify an absolute font size, say the number. So in our case, let's pull this out for a second and look what I did here. So I've changed the color to a light gray. So I think I grabbed that from one of these ones. But I just Googled like hex code for gray. This one, Canva. And then I just did the same thing we've done before where I have a P wrapping around. So I have a P here that's wrapping around here. And then in the middle, I did this. So we did the same thing we've done before where I say style equals color and then the hex code here. And then font size, partner link here. And one thing you'll note too is if I had put like a space, then it might have rendered it as a bullet point. I haven't tried that, but let's say that's what I would maybe expect it to do. But if you notice, I just put font size equals 1 and closed it. So if we break that even farther out, you can see that I'm just saying wrap this text in a font element that says font size equals 1. So when we talked about here before, font size equals 1, this is really tiny text. That's what's happening here to make this small and gray. So that's how I was able to do that. Like I said, and one thing that you'll notice too in building different workflows and apps and everything is that there's multiple ways to do something. This is just one way to do something that has rendered the web page or the app to be the way that I want it to be, or to look the way that I want it to look, or function the way that I want it to function. And that's good enough for me. So let's move on next to how I added these images in here. So I have another instruction block in this case. And what I've done here is I had some images that I wanted on my webpage. Let's look for a new one to play with. So I love one called, I love a website called Pexels. So it has all these really beautiful like videos and pictures that just look so gorgeous and professional. So since it's New Year's Day, I'm going to download this one to play with. And what I like to do when I'm naming a an image is just to like describe it, like let's say like female hand holding a fire sparkler, something like that. You could say a firework sparkler. That way, like, you can just copy and paste that when you want to do alt text. So for our screen reader, for example, they're reading like the name. If they're reading the name of the image file, then it can read as female hand holding a firework sparkler for anyone who has like a disability, for example. So let's see how I would upload that and have it display using things like Markdown in our editor here. So if we go, the first step we're going to do is actually we need to upload this image into our data manager kind of thing, you could say, or our account. So if we go to our document dashboard and we say files, we go to images, then you can say choose file, female hand holding firework sparkler, and say upload. And that will allow us to use that same image across multiple different workflows and apps and builds without having to upload it every time. It's already in our account, which is pretty powerful. So what we're going to do next is actually just copy and paste this where we want it to go. So let's come down to where we are here. So this is the same thing we did before. I just didn't have the color changed. I made it bold by doing 2 asterisks using Markdown, and I used the underline element to underline this text to get this result. And what I've done in the images part is I've centered them by opening and closing center. And I've done a this convention here, which is what I'll do next. So if I want to, let's kind of get this cleared out. So if I want to tell the computer to show a file here, then I can do that in multiple ways. But the first way is to just use some straight brackets around something that says, sorry, now it's underlined. I just want it to say file in all caps, space, and then just paste the what you just copied from your images here. So you just need that sort of language. It doesn't have to be linked like it is in this case. You can just it can just be like not linked, not hyperlinked. But that was how you're going to do it. So you're just going to say straight bracket, and then file in all caps, and then your image name. So let's go ahead and take that and put that in here to put that underneath. It's actually just telling you, so we're just telling the computer, hey, that file that I have in my account in images, can you grab that, the one that's called this, and can you put it here? That's what we're saying to the computer right now. So when we refresh that, we should see that underneath here. So now we see that image has been added under here. So if we wanted to center that, we can put center. If we want to change the size, you can do that as well. But that's just one way to do that. There's a second way actually that we can do this, but having it be a little bit different, more as an embedded image that can be clicked on. So in this case, I've given the example of this builds sort of code, so that when someone clicks on it, they can actually like zoom in and really kind of take a better look at what this all says. So if you want to do it that way, then this is how you can do that. So this is one way you can do it, by doing this sort of static image and then centering it, and you can put like different styles and colors and sizes and whatever else. And when somebody tries to click on it, nothing happens. But if you want it to be something where, let's say they click on it and it takes them to another one of your websites or something else, then this is how you can do that. You could also make it to where there's alt text and stuff like that. So let's first go to how I did this. So I use something called IMGBB, which is a free image hosting platform where you can have a pro plan where it takes away the ads and you can do direct linking and have space and all this and have API access. But if you just wanted to use it as a, I was just going to see if I can do reader mode for a sec. You could even just do it like, you can see like reader mode, for example, but you can't click on the upload. I thought I could get around it, but that's fine. Anyway, so if you want to, it says you can drag and drop anywhere if you want to start uploading your images now. 32 megabyte limit, direct image links, BB code, and HTML thumbnails. So let's use our sparkler example. So let's just drag and drop that there. We can choose if we want it to be auto deleted or after this many days or whatever else or not. And we can say, it says you can add more images from your computer or add image URLs, whatever else. Let's say upload. And you can get your different links here: viewer links, direct link, HTML codes, BB codes. In our case, let's say I want it to be, let's say medium linked is fine, copy. And then let's put that in right underneath so we can see the difference between the two. I just copied and pasted that here, save, refresh. And now we have this huge sparkler. But you can change the size if you want to. So let's say, for example, if we look at it here, you could change, like, you can add some sizing here if you want to. But in our case, we don't want to, just because it's an example. So when you click on it, it's going to take the person to this page where you can um, zoom in or out. If you wanted to change the destination of where the person goes when they click on this, let's say, for example, I want someone to be directed to Chromium Academy's website, then I can just change that from our anchor link that we learned before in this part, this href, because this one is referring to where the person will be sent when they click on the image. And this hyperlink is actually referring to where the image is being hosted. And then this is the alt text I told you about, female hand holding a fireworks sparkler. That's why it was important also for me to name it that way, because it saves me time in the future for this alt text, which is for the screen reader purposes. And it also tells you, as the person who is building everything, what this picture is for yourself as well, as the builder and editor. So now what's going to happen is when the person clicks on this page or the image, it's going to take them where I wanted them to go, which is my Academy website. So that's the power of how you can do that. And you can even like create, this is kind of like a blog, you could say. So you can create sort of blogs or whatever else, or just add more dynamic elements to your builds with these different tools. So I will kind of take this back to where it was before. So now we have this example here, or you can embed an image using the IMGBB method, which I've done in this case. And let's go now on to this next piece, which is codes used to change the font color. The only thing, these three things are the same. They're just telling you, as the person who's viewing this, what I use to like what the code looks like. So as I mentioned before, in order to do that, let's go down to that section now. This is the same thing we learned before, where you use the underline tag and some markdown to make it bold. We use a backtick here to show the person that this is now, I'm telling the computer, render this as code, like show them what the code is. So that's why it turns pink as well, is to indicate that this is code, not text. And so this is just me telling you how I was able to do that and what it looked like, which hex codes I used, and what like syntax I used. And then how I did this help block as well, help text, is the same thing that we learned before. So if you go to settings, I just said to make a code block visible to the end user, use the backtick. Let's say code block or phrase visible to end user. Let's say to make code visible to end user, use a backtick key on the keyboard on either side of the code phrase. So that backtick there. So that's just a little help text for you there. And what that looks like is this here, like this. So now you can see the code, and then we've done the same thing here, here, and here. So that's all the same. And so now we'll go on to this last part here, and then I'll just show you one more thing after this. So in this last part, I put a lot of different things together. Let's break it out together in our notes. So here we've done a couple of things that we've seen before. I've used Markdown to make this both bold and italic. We've used the center configuration here and here to open and close that. So I've said, in this case, I've said bold and italicize this entire phrase here, and then stop doing that, and then also center it, and then stop doing that. And then here I've said strong because I want this to be bold, within there. That's another way. So this is an HTML way to make something bold, is strong. And then to make it bold in Markdown, you use the two asterisks. I've tried that before here within here, but now the computer, like I said, is expecting to now read code in HTML. So if I try to do two asterisks here, it's not going to do it the way I want it to do. So I'm saying bold all of this. So now we have bold and italicized and centered. And then also, this is already bold, italicized, and centered. I might not need this. I'll have to go back and see if I can take this. Let's just try this really quick. So let's see. I think I only wanted, and I think initially I only wanted certain things to show as strong. So let's just see if I take this out. If everything goes the way I want it to. So let's say maybe I don't need both of those. So let's just check. Okay, so it's just a heavier bold, you could say. So if you wanted it to be like this, which comes out more like this. So if I wanted it to be a stronger bold than this, then I can do the strong. And in my case, let's just keep it. I kind of like this one. It's a little bit cuter, but it did illustrate sort of that point or the difference between using the markdown bold and because you see how this is like unbolded and this is bolded. I kind of like that. That looks fine. So let's keep that as it is. So I took off the strong, but now you know that if you wanted to, you could just put strong on either side to bold as well in HTML. But let's just keep the markdown one for now. And then let's go back to seeing what's next here. So now if we break this out, what we're really saying is we've bolded, italicized, and centered this next part, this text. Now I have a paragraph that I want the color of, or the style. I want the style to have a color of this. So I've just used the same violet hex code as I had before. And then I have just some text and some links here. So if we break that out together, I'm saying, and some emojis. So here I'm just saying, learn more from me and about how to use no-code, low-code development techniques in your build by visiting. And then I have a hyperlink using Markdown here. So I have straight bracket, and this parentheses. So if I say here that it's linked off here. So I would just say too, like, because I kind of just said that like you can't use Markdown within HTML, but clearly here I have. So I didn't have to use an anchor href here. So I would say just play with it because I think in me saying that, it's just that I've had some experiences where once I've started something in HTML, it didn't let me kind of use Markdown within it in different ways. So just kind of play with it and see like how it goes and how it lets you kind of try different things. So in this case, I use straight brackets, straight bracket, parentheses to do text and a link. Then I use that BR break because I wanted there to be a space in between here. You can also connect with me. So basically I'm just saying move this down with these breaks. Then you say you can also connect with me on LinkedIn using straight brackets and the parentheses again with the link in between. If you haven't already, I've used an emoji here. I didn't use the emoji here because since it's italicized, it looked just kind of like weirdly stretched. But that's what's happening here. So that is how I had all of these different elements inside of here. And the next thing I'll show you is just quickly how I use the same type of thing on the next issue page that I just had. Because we are able to see it because it was selected on the first issues page that I wanted to see this one too. And you can see we've now progressed to the next label on the bar. And I've just done the same thing that we've learned before where I have this all the same. I just copied and pasted it and then changed a couple of things there. I have the same thing here where I have the page logic say show if which mag issue is 1.2. And then I have it to where I just went to Giphy and I looked for, I think I said coming soon. And then just looked at what I wanted And then I found like stay tuned farther down, which looked somewhere, doesn't matter, but you could just see there's lots of different options and different fun things that you can do here. But I just chose the one I liked. I said I just chose, let's say we just choose any of them like we did before. Chose this. I said embed, made it responsive or not. In this case, I said that. I copied it and then I put it there like that. And that's it. Actually, this one doesn't really need this P at the end. So let's just see. So that's because that was just because like I didn't properly like finish deleting it before, because as you can see here, like I said, it just says via Giphy is just going to be a link at the bottom. So let's just show you what that looks like. So now we have coming soon, but this one has this link on the bottom via Giphy. So I said I just pulled that off. So if you look at this opening element and closing phrase or whatever you want to call it, this is going to be one phrase here, opening the paragraph and closing the paragraph. So we can just take that off. And then that will take off this via Giphy part here. So that's just to say I didn't need that P at the end of the original one. So now what we see is stay tuned, and you can probably make it to where all this stuff doesn't have it as well, but it's up to you. And then let's now go on to, I think would be one of the later pieces of this, which is if we stay here if we go next to the settings for the last page. So when the person says continue, then they're going to be taken to the last page of this, which means that they've completed the work. They've completed going through the workflow. Now, one thing I'll note here is Zapier. So I won't go to a deep dive of this, but just to make a kind of a quick initial flag about this is that in order for certain actions to be triggered by a completed workflow, you need them to go all the way through the end. So instead of using a kickout page, so something won't fire in Zapier if you just use a kickout page from the default sort of Zapier settings and the way that's set up right now. But if you have it to where the person goes all the way to the end to this page where they say continue and there's no more, and they see the kind of end screen, then a Zap will fire. So just a heads up when you're building Zaps as well. So the last thing I'll say here is that you can customize the message. The default says, here are your documents, because normally document is often used, but not always used to add documents where you can use the word tagger and plugin or whatever to make the variables that people put in appear in a document, such as like as a lawyer, you have lots of contracts that are templates that you use over and over with lots of different clients, and you don't want to have to like manually put those in every single time. And this is really great for that as well, but it's obviously such a powerful tool that you can use it in multiple different ways. But this is just to say that you can customize the last message that the person sees. So if they say, thank you for visiting, like in this case, this would say normally maybe when you're building this, it will say, here are your documents. You can just change that by going to settings at your tab on the top, go to customize messages, and then you can put that here. And I just said, thank you for visiting code word hex. There's those backticks again. See, and I put an emoji. You next time. And I just love this little cartwheel guy. So cute. And you can also like do other ones as well. You can, if you say in your output documents that you want to send the final document sent to a particular email address, then on the backside, you'll want to customize the message because it will say, thank you, your information has been submitted, or it's not been submitted, or whatever else. If you don't want the person says like, do not display finalized documents to the workflow taker, then you'll want to customize that hidden document completion message as well, which will look like this page. You can also change how the email template is. So let's say you did have a document connected to this workflow and you wanted that to be emailed to someone, then you can change what the subject line and the body of that email says straight from Documate. And you can also say like email session to continue later is that save link to continue later button. So you can change what the text of that says. So that's this one here. And when someone clicks on that, they just get taken to putting their email address in, and then they get a link where they can start where they pick up where they left off. And you can put like your different email title, email message, etc., etc. So in our case, that is kind of how we got to the end of the digital magazine. I just wanted to point out, just kind of review and see if there was anything else I wanted to point out. One thing is that you can do access permission. So let's say I only wanted certain people to be able to take this. If I have anyone with a link, which is the default, then these are public workflows and they're accessible with or without a login by anyone with the link. So access will be denied if you're pulling from a private data source. So if you have like a Clio, if your Clio account is added to this, or if for whatever else you are using like a CSV file that has private data in it as well, then this will show up and the person will say like access denied or whatever. If you want to use like logged in, so if you want the user to have to log in, you could do specific email domains or specific email addresses, and you can make it to where the user can only complete the workflow once as well. So different things here you can do in the back is connect your workflow and so on. But for now, just to show you where we got to here. In the future, you can have, like, I'll show you kind of some of this stuff that I'm working on in the back, which is like how to add tables to your builds, and where I've kind of put other references that I haven't kind of used just yet. But if you want to have like a hidden page in your workflow, it's like I was saying about the page logic. So making it to where the configuration is impossible will make it to where this page is hidden. So I'm saying show this page if the code words answer value is Brittany. But as I said, the answer needs to be only 3 characters. So this is more than 3 characters. So this page will never show because it's required and it will never be more than 3 characters because that's the minimum and the maximum. So that's how you can have it to where that page does not show up, but you can still have it in here as the builder to work on things for when you're ready to have something else happen. So I think that is all I'll go over for today. One of the other notes I'll just make quickly is I always am like a serial saver because I'm terrified that all this work will be for naught. There's lots of other stuff that I could kind of go into, but I think for now that's fine to just show you kind of some of the things I was able to do with this fun build. This particular video will appear here after I'm done with it, and you'll be able to access this page very soon with all of the different things that I need for you. So I hope that this was helpful, and I know it's a bit longer, but I hope that was fun and interesting, and feel free again to connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already here, and check out some of my courses that I've created on no-code, low-code tech and sort of Document and all the different fun things that we have. I also created a community called Chromium Global, which is a free online community for anyone who's interested in this kind of stuff. But just email me at academy@chromium.pro if you'd like access to that community. You also get access to that community when you sign up for Code Word Hex. So Code Word Hex is actually in my Academy course. It's this one here. So you could just register here for access to the magazine. So you might have already done that if you're watching this video, but that's just to say that's where that lives. And I hope you enjoyed this and that all of your builds are amazing and that you have a really, really happy new year, and 2023 is the best. Okay, see you later.